Today on the Tearsheet podcast.
Our character, it's actual a person. It's a woman named Kim, and she basically is very relatable as a character, like all of us, where we sometimes make mistakes around finance. We sometimes need help. We sometimes just need encouragement. So it's really more of a voice that's codified, that's more practical around what people generally daily do around their money and their habits and some of the things they do right and wrong, but always in a very judgment-free way.
Welcome to the Tearsheet podcast. I'm Zack Miller. There are a lot of personal finance apps out there, and yet many people still feel shut out from being able to have a conversation about their finances. Maybe the apps are too heavy, too complicated, or just the language is different than how people talk in real life. Scott Grimes addresses all of this with Stackin. Stackin's CEO and co-founder built a personal finance app which lets people save and invest, and it's entirely text message based. So not only is there not a complicated app people need to learn, there's no app. He and his team built this for the average American who wants this level of simplicity and guidance around their finances, and it needs to be judgment-free. Stackin is well on its way to 1 million users and has sent over 70 million text messages over the past year. Scott joins us on the podcast to talk about the app and how Stackin tries to establish a relationship based on trust and fun. More fintech apps are adopting a conversational interface, and we discuss the benefits in doing that for UX. Scott shares some of his product roadmap as well. Scott Grimes is my guest today on the Tearsheet podcast. Before we jump into the podcast, I wanted to introduce you to Outlier, Tearsheet's leading membership program. It's designed for top fintech and financial services professionals to stay on top daily of the biggest trends, the top companies, and the leaders of this next generation of finance. Get industry briefings by experts like the ones we're doing this January on best practices in PR and customer acquisition. Find out more at tearsheet.co/outlier.
My name is Scott Grimes. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Stackin, and we try to create the simplest entry point into finance. That is kind of our goal and mission.
And where did the idea come from? What's your background? How did it lead to sort of building Stackin?
I had a previous company to Stackin that sold to Warner Music a few years back, Uproxx Media, which I served as CEO and founder for many years. So more of a content digital media company. So definitely ended up in fintech a little backwards, not a traditional banking background by nature, but was always a big fan of the finance space and fintech in general. Got interested in this specific idea. I grew up in Central Texas in an area that didn't have a lot of wealth, didn't have a ton of access, especially people in the town, to kind of financial resources, advisors, definitely information that was relevant to that community, and just saw over time that there was just this large lack of just awareness amongst most people about finance, personal finance, financial planning. And it wasn't because people weren't smart. It wasn't because people didn't have interest. They just didn't have a connection point that was very relevant to their lives. And as I got older and moved in LA or San Francisco or New York, there was clearly a very different experience that some people had around finance when they had more access and ultimately more relevance to their financial lives. And so I think at the beginning of Stackin, the goal was, could we create this cultural connection point where we could get people en masse, specifically more in the middle of the country, to start paying attention to finance, but in a way that was more approachable, that made people feel good around money, but ultimately let them take action, because we always say at Stackin, if you don't take action around your finances, nothing will change. And that's really the goal for us, is can we make it simple to get started? Can we make it judgment-free? Can we make it in a way that most people, we specifically target a little bit of a younger audience, sub 45, but a way everybody can access it. Sometimes finance is not accessible to everybody, or it doesn't feel that way. Fintech's done a great job of breaking some of those barriers. But I think we're just trying to do that from a communication relationship standpoint first, really trying to get to know people, using lots of data to try to help predict at some point, but ultimately really establishing a relationship of trust, of fun, of understanding, and again, kind of the opposite of what I experienced growing up, which is a lack of access, and just providing that access point in a more curated experience.
Very interesting. And so, I mean, obviously there's no dearth of personal finance apps. They've been, one of the first sort of, apps that kind of showed up on the market. So I guess my question to you is where you felt as a whole, they sort of failed, I guess, users.
I don't think they failed at all. I just think it's the way that people are approached and how you ultimately get people into your ecosystem. So for us, again, we're 100% text based. So we built a messaging platform on Twilio, and all of our communication originates via SMS. So that is generally a bit of a different entry point,
Mm-hmm.
in that the way that we communicate is directly in a messaging environment and your text environment. And we tend to be a little bit more guided by nature as opposed to conversational. So the approach is different. The way that we've codified kind of the voice behind Stackin, and we've sent almost 70 million text messages to date over the last year. So we've gotten pretty good at understanding the approach and the language.
What is that
around.
voice and language? So you mentioned it's guidance more than conversational.
Yeah, it's really just it's more relational, right? It's a tone and voice that is approachable by nature, so it lets people feel like they're not being judged around their finances. Our character, it's actual a person. It's a woman named Kim, and she basically is very relatable as a character, like all of us, where we sometimes make mistakes around finance. We sometimes need help. We sometimes just need encouragement. So it's really more of a voice that's codified, that's more practical around what people generally daily do around their money and their habits, and some of the things they do right and wrong, but always in a very judgment-free way. Also in a tone and voice that people speak in, the lexicon, the nature and the words people use. A lot of times around finance, even specific words don't mean things to most people that might seem very obvious, especially to most of us
Like
in the
overly
fintech
technical
world.
words or something.
Yeah, it's not even overly
Yeah.
technical. I mean, we look at things like even using the word interest as opposed to grow your money.
Mm-hmm.
People respond very differently to those. They mean the same thing, but people respond vastly differently to that if you look over lots of data. So yeah, there's just definitely a tone and voice that is needed to get people to react, to engage, and that's really what we try to do. Once you get into our ecosystem, sign up for our messaging platform, we really try to get you to start participating, engaging, and ultimately taking action. And there's a lot of science that goes behind that.
So can we, I just want to take one step back. Like, so how do you get people onto the platform? Where do they hear about Stackin? How are they finding you, and how do you onboard them?
It's a great question. Again, kind of with my background with a lot of content in the past, that's really where we start the relationship. We began the company programming lots of content within social, Snap, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, lots of all video for the most part. So purely video by nature. If you kind of check out one of the videos, they're very irreverent and different. They're not like any other finance video you'll probably ever watch.
Awesome.
But we like that, right? We talk about topics and engage in topics around what people are truly interested in life, and try to bring that cultural connection point that they may have, and bring finance into that cultural connection point. And I think that's really what's different about the brand, even the name Stackin, and just everything that we've kind of built. We try to make it feel agnostic, where you can, everybody's approachable. We try to create a diverse environment of hosts. We try to make it fun, and ultimately just make it disarming. And so everything you watch from our videos generally has some sort of knowledge in there. We're trying to help you understand or learn something. But ultimately, we just want you to be a fan of the brand, interact, and then, once you kind of engage with our brand, kind of go deeper down our funnel, and ultimately into our messaging platform, where we can have a more one-to-one relationship with our end user, and then help guide, kind of to other touch points within their life. But it all starts with social for us. We have lots, I think almost 500,000 social followers in total. And that's really where we identified the brand at first, built the brand, continue to expand there. But that's generally where most of our audience comes, is from the major social networks and video platforms.
Okay, so I'm watching a Stackin video. What's the call to action, and I guess what are the next activities you're looking for from me as a user to get me on board?
Really, it's just engagement, right? We started we realized quickly when we began to program socially that there was just this huge need amongst most Americans to really need a different touch point. Like, most people just don't have a connection point to finance. And for us, we just wanted to make it really simple for an end user to start getting more knowledge around their personal financial lives, and ultimately just in general about, personal finance. And yeah, for us, at that first point in interaction almost always occurs with, watching a video or seeing some piece of content that Stackin has produced. And from there, what we figured out quickly was that most people were engaging, liking, commenting, really creating, just some sort of engagement within a social ecosystem. And that's actually what prompted us after a bit of time to build our messaging platform and begin the kind of the onboarding of SMS, was the fact that we had so many users reach out directly, whether that was through Facebook Messenger, whether that's through email, letting us know that they just needed, more conversation around their financial lives, and they wanted Stackin to be that touch point. That's ultimately how we ended up building our messaging platform. And to date, I think we have over 600,000 active users on our messaging platform after the first about 18 months. So there was just this large need of people who, who reached out socially, who said, "Hey, we don't have a relationship. We need a relationship. Or we want a deeper relationship with Stackin," and that's kind of how we ended up with the model you see today.
So I guess I didn't ask the question very specifically. That you did answer part of it. I want to know, basically from the time that I'm convinced, you've messaged me. I like the vibe. I want to get involved in Stackin. The call to action, you're driving me to the website, to a landing page, or am I just interacting with like the Facebook Messenger there?
No, we get your phone number, your
Okay.
email, and your name, and then from there you begin a text program. So
Okay.
it's all SMS based, and you ultimately we have your phone number, so it's all based off SMS. From there, we have a mobile web application. We have chatbots. We have all kinds of things that we have you interact with off of SMS if we need to go deeper with you as a user. But our touch point is 2 to 3 times a week. You sign up for a guided text program. That program is based off of your interests, so we know a lot about your interests as you come into our platform. And then from there, you're a user for as long as you want. Most of our users, on average, at this point, are going to be 3 years plus in terms of the average length of a user within our platform. And that's how you get onboarded. So it's basically all within SMS, and all within a mobile app after that.
That's great. Thank you. So once I'm in, and once I'm in that guided program, like what kind of messaging am I getting? What's the functionality that, Stackin, or what's the advice that Stackin is sort of reaching out to me with?
Yeah, so right now it's more built on kind of segmentation on your interest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's based on investing or maybe savings or debt. So it's more segment based off of who our user is, where they're coming from, and ultimately what they're interested in. It evolves over time as it gets to know more about you. As we build the company, again, we've only been around 2.5 years, and our messaging platform is more nascent than that. We will ultimately build in more personalization as we acquire more data. We're right now starting to connect people's entire financial lives, a small portion, through Stackin. But obviously, the more information and data we have, the more personalized we can make the experience. So the goal is for a portion of our audience who need or want a deeper conversation. That will be longer term. The goal is to make it very personalized based on you. Right now, it's still very segmented, again, based on your interest, and just really trying to get people who are, again, maybe they're interested in learning how to start investing, or they want to just get more information. We provide that. The first 30 days is generally based off of whatever that interest is for that time period. And then it evolves into, once we get some more information, into some other topic or information. And within that, we partner, which we can get into next as well. We curate a marketplace where we really try to work with companies, products that ultimately help our end users save money or make money is the ultimate goal. But ultimately keep them away from predatory or pernicious type products that finance sometimes can be notoriously known for. But ultimately, we're trying to keep an experience with our users that's fun, interesting, but ultimately we want them to take action. We want them to save money on banking fees.
Can you give some examples of the types of companies in the marketplace?
Sure. We've worked with everybody from Avaro to Chime to Bankrate, and even we have direct relationships with Radius. Right now, we mainly work within traditional banking. High yield savings is our current categories. We'll be expanding a little bit in investing, but we're opening our investing marketplace here in about 2 weeks. We'll jump to the credit marketplace later, probably mid this year, as well as insurance, so credit cards, loans, and then ultimately insurance. But right now we specialize mainly in, like I said, high yield savings and more traditional bank accounts. But a lot of neobanks, and then also a lot of Amex, Discover, a few others on the kind of high yield savings side.
I'm curious also, like, the UI is so simple and so non-distracting. I'm curious from a product development point of view, do you get, at least hearing from your customers, that they want, more of a UI? Like, is there pressure to like kind of move away from just text? I mean, how does that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, the simplicity ultimately is what makes it work funny enough. I mean, that's really
You
for
have to
us.
like
It's
fight
just,
against the feature creep, right? Like you have to keep the
yeah,
simplicity.
exactly. We built some Stackin branded products. So we have a Stackin branded front end bank account where we do partner with Radius, and we have a lightweight investing option. And everything that we build, it's built for simplicity because, again, most people don't there's not a lot of intrinsic knowledge around specific topics when they come in, and all we want to do is get people to engage, feel comfortable, and ultimately take action as a result of that. So the entire user experience, and again, there's a lot of technology on the back end to make it very simple. When you're messaging people, hundreds of thousands of people a day, um, various messages, and driving lots of data from that, there's a lot of complexities behind that. But yeah, the goal is to, from a user experience, to make it simple, make it clean, make it easy, and ultimately just kind of be in the background of your life. So not every message we send is intended for you to go do something. It's not meant to spam you with an offer every single time that a text goes out. It's really built to 2 to 3 times a week to remind you, to get you to, from a cultural standpoint, pay attention to something. Sometimes just to make you laugh or think about something. Sometimes it's silly. Sometimes it's if we have an offer or we think something makes sense for your life, we'll put you something in front of you we think makes sense for you. So, but yeah, that's the ultimate experience, is to make it easy, make it simple. Again, we call it the simplest entry point to finance. We don't need you to connect your bank account right up front. We don't need your social security right up front. We don't need your mother's maiden name. We like to collect data over time. The more information we get over time, the more personalized we tend to make it. But up front, we
It's
just
sort
want
of
to
like
make
a
it really
long
simple.
it's sort of like a long drawn out like onboarding process, right?
That is the exact
Or
point of it.
uh-huh.
You
One
lose
question
so
at a
many people.
time. Hmm.
You lose so many people up front when you make it difficult to get in. So what we've seen is, so many people are lost in an onboarding process when a lot of information is required right up front. And for us, we are able to start a relationship, which is what people need up
Hmm.
front, to establish that trust, establish that relationship. And then people are much more prone over time to give you larger quantities of information to help guide them. And for us, that creates a business economics that work very well in terms of how our users come in, the onboarding process, the cost of that onboarding process, and then ultimately the value derived from a much longer term relationship. And so much of finance is driven by customer acquisition costs.
Hmm.
A lot of decisions are made simply because the costs are very high for most companies to acquire customers, for them to get them into products, to upsell to other products, and that's really where we kind of approach it differently. Our customer acquisition cost is extraordinarily low. We try to make it very simple to begin the relationship. And then over time, like I said, deepen that relationship with more data, engagement, and ultimately personalization. But again, we just approach it very differently in terms of the relationship with the customer. And ultimately, because we don't have an intrinsic need with a very high customer acquisition cost to get users to take something instantly or to do something instantly, it really allows us to get to know our users, allows us to establish more of a relationship, and know that whether you might need something on day one or you might need something on day 200, there isn't that ever-present need to kind of pay back that CAC in an instant amount of time and drive user behavior because of that.
Interesting. And so we have time for one last question. I want to ask a little more personal question. You're an experienced entrepreneur in a different field. You decided to make the plunge into fintech. I guess, is there something that you know today that you wish you would have known, a few years ago when you started this?
That's a good question. Uh, that's a great question. I would actually have to think about that a little bit more. I
Was
didn't
fintech
look.
harder or easier than you expected? I mean, I'm trying to get a
Mm,
flavor for, I guess, the different, your perspective on different industry.
but it's very different in terms of the way we monetize. It's not very different from human behavior standpoint and the
Hmm.
way that we get people to engage and interact and ultimately take action. Like that is very similar. Obviously, it's been great. It's a learning curve. Always, there's some benefits from jumping into an industry where you don't have a long history and background,
Agreed.
and then there's obviously challenges because you need to surround yourself with individuals who do have much more of that expertise. We have a great CTO and president whose entire life is built in this, so that is helpful on the offset. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of advantages to not to not knowing too much. And then there's plenty of disadvantages for mistakes being made that you maybe could have not made had you had a little bit more intrinsic knowledge of the space. The way we tackle it again is my old company was mainly driven through content and people, and this is mainly driven through engineers, data, and automation. So they couldn't be more different in a lot of ways. But the way that we interact and the way we communicate, and ultimately, what we're doing is very similar in that we kind of use entertainment and engagement to get people to pay attention. But ultimately, instead of paying attention to things that we find are a bit more benign in life, entertaining for sure, whether that's movies or music or sports, we try to get people to pay attention to things that can ultimately, be a bit more impactful for their daily lives and finance, your health. There are certain areas that if you can improve upon those things, and you can help people do that in a much broader spectrum at scale, tends to create more of a social impact and value. And I think that's, for me personally, has been a great experience, and a great part of this has just been able to, again, we're getting close to 1 million people here soon who we're their primary point of financial information, guidance, and help. And a lot of these individuals, I feel like we're, a positive impact because we can ultimately help them save money, make money, but sometimes just have a relationship that didn't exist before.
That's great. And I lied about it being the last question. I have one small question. You mentioned later on this year, you're going to introduce a credit marketplace. Any other thing you can share with us about sort of where you're headed in 2020?
Yeah, so we Experian led our last round of funding, and as our partnership has grown, we wanted to. Credit is an important marketplace for us. We didn't want to start in credit because there's a lot more intricacies around that specific marketplace. But it obviously, from Credit Karma and NerdWallet, have both done phenomenal jobs of creating amazing credit marketplaces. We want to basically follow in the same footsteps we have within banking and high yield savings. We want to have a very curated marketplace where we can give our users great options of credit products that make sense, but that are not pernicious. And also, if they need credit building help too, it's not just about the credit side of taking credit or loans. It's also, if you need help building credit, we want to be there to help you do that as well, because a lot of our users are younger and need help on the credit building side as well. That's a big new kind of introduction that we'll roll out soon. Personalization too. We've got a new product coming out in the next 6 months that'll be a very personalized version. So as I spoke about earlier, instead of being segmented based on your interest, it'll really be more of a one-to-one experience via messaging, and sometimes chatbots as well, that helps you more personally guide you if we have enough information up front. So that'll be a definite new feature that'll feel a lot different than the current experience you get, but ultimately will just result in a more personalized experience to help get you to the products you need when you need them.
Scott, thank you for joining us on the Tearsheet podcast today.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.